Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. Welcome, listeners, to our next episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. And today we're joined by Dr Shiraz Khan. Hello, Shiraz. How are you?
Hi, guys. How are you doing? Very well. Well, thanks for inviting me. How's life been treating you after lockdown?
We've been doing very well.
Very good. Nice to see you.
We've been surviving.
Yeah, we are. We're doing all right, actually. Thank you very much. And brilliant to see you, Shiraz. Thanks for coming on.
Yes. No trouble.
So let's get you introduced. So Shiraz is a dentist. He's also the founder of Sculpt Composite, which is a new innovative composite learning platform. He's director of the Young Dentists Association. He's a key opinion leader and also a breakdancer. And the breakdancing bit, that's an important bit for the discussion we're going to have today, because we're going to talk about the power of exercise and how this adds to every element of our life. You know, it's your physical health, it's your mental health, it improves your decision making. And you, Shiraz, obviously you're big in terms of your exercise with your breakdancing, but it's a really important part of your life, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think, they say quite openly, don't they, that physical well-being goes hand in hand with mental well-being, and being able to regularly exercise, whatever it is, get out there, just release endorphins, work the body, get the blood pumping, those sorts of things massively increase what I think your aptitude, your ability to cope with stress, your ability to cope with difficult decisions, things not going your way, but also to cope with the day-to-day. So for me, physical and mental well-being go in the same, or they go hand in hand, really. And sure, it's a little bit more creative than the routine gym goers out there, etc., which I also do. But it's fantastic because it's strangely enjoyable and addictive, really.
And I mean, now you're a medical scientist, you're a qualified dentist. But when did it hit you that the physical exercise and the link with mental, was that something that came to you quite young when you were a kid? Have you always wanted, and you've always kind of looked to say physically fit, or as you've become more informed and educated in that subject, it's given an increased importance in your life?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? Because frankly, I was always active. I was always into sport. It was, at the beginning, it was cricket, then it was football. Then I was playing basketball relatively competitively and all these things. And
when did you start breakdancing, Shiraz?
So 2007.
Oh, okay. So recently, not when you were young.
No. Really late in the game. No, really late in the game. And all these kids that you see flying around that are like 8 years old. I mean, I've got a hope in hell of getting around and getting past them. So I was always into some form of sport, whatever it may be. And when you're studying in your early teens, late teens, you're always looking forward to the next break, aren't you? It's break time. All right, let's go play football. Let's go play cricket, whatever. I quite enjoyed PE and all those things. And then I went to university, and I was in search of being able to still remain physically active. So I went to cricket trials, and I got into, I think it was seconds or thirds for University of Birmingham, which is kind of a big deal, actually.
Decent level, yeah.
Yeah. I was really, really honoured. And then, training was a bit too rigorous for my educational timetable. It just didn't really fit so well. So I was still, I suppose, playing or being physically active, playing sport, cricket, football, basketball, whatever it was. But it was around university, because ultimately you're there for one thing, aren't you? You're there to get your education, get a qualification. And then I sort of was like, oh, I'd love I saw someone dancing in the town centre of Birmingham, and I was like, I'd love to know how to do like yourselves, right? When you see these moves being done, you're like, well, where do you start with something like that? You can't. It's not exactly something you just fall over. Like, oh, guess what? I held myself. There's although that's what it looks like to many. There's a lot.
That's what it can feel like as well.
Exactly. Andy Acton knows firsthand. And I was like, oh, how would you go about learning that? Went to a session, and the rest is really history. But there was a turning point in dentistry, because I've done a degree before dentistry, which was medical science, and finished that. Had a year out, soul searching, if you want to call it that, and then went back into dentistry. And my dad was like, yeah, you need to stop that silly rolling around stuff now, don't you? Really, you need to chuck it in. You've got a professional life ahead of you. You need to. And I was like, and this was the moment of reckoning. It was like, Dad, it's because I do that on the side that allows me to perform in the educational side. And it's like the pin dropped it. And it was probably about 2008, 2009 when that kind of happened. And I was like, oh, so I actually need this to be good at this. And then ever since, I mean, it's always a continuous battle for time. I've heard a fantastic video from a doctor from the US, and he used the analogy. It's like going out with two girlfriends, both hate each other, both know about each other, and they're all asking for your time. You know, so it's almost like the perfect analogy for me.
But in some ways, the breakdancing bit is a very creative, expressive form, and obviously the sort of dentistry you're doing is incredibly creative with a great aesthetic outcome. And it makes you wonder whether there's kind of a link between the fact that you're creative, but it's just being channeled and delivered in different ways.
I'd love to see the way Shiraz presents a treatment plan.
It's pretty dogmatic. If you know where I work, it's pretty dogmatic. There's a few shapes in it.
I was just thinking that creativity. Yeah, I can do your teeth like this.
You're giving away all your moves. I can see it straight away. I think with dentistry, there's a heavy what's the way to put this? There's a heavy focus on it being very scientific. It is very, I mean, it's not a focus. It is a scientific field. You said medical science, which summarize it to a T. I think there are elements to be able to express your creativity. And it's exactly that I need in my life. I need that, I'm the sort of person who needs spontaneity sort of in my life. And the more, as we've been knowing each other for a long time, Andy, right? The more you're doing, the more you're trying to strive to improve and better yourself or whatever, the more funneled your life becomes in terms of time commitments, in terms of being able to be spontaneous. Oh, I just fancy going to the Cotswolds tomorrow. That sort of stuff doesn't really happen. It has to be quite prescriptive. And then when you get this hour, you get to kind of do what you want, and you don't have to think about it in a dogmatic way. I mean, of course, training has a systematic way to do it. If you're competing, you need to be making sure you're doing endurance training, you're doing strength training, you're doing rehearsals for certain types of movements. So there is a science to that as well. But as I've become probably slightly less competitive over the last year, I'd say, especially with COVID, it's given me the chance to just be a bit free and enjoy moving around. And that gives so much solace to the mind. So that if you troubleshooting, we talk about troubleshooting all the time. If you've got a problem and you can't get over it, or actually go away, do something completely off piece, come back, and guess what? You'll probably be able to deal with it, won't you? And that's kind of my off piece type of thing. And unfortunately, with dentistry, sometimes we end up, you treat a lot of patients all day long, and then you'll probably be doing a course in the evening, or you'll be doing a course somewhere, or you'll be going on a conference, or you'll be discussing interdisciplinary treatment planning. It all becomes so insular and so sort of inbred, not in the bad way, but you're all just with dentists all the time, or dental professionals. This takes me out of it. This takes me out of the whole circle. Which is something I need. When
you're doing the sculpt training, does that sort of give you almost a sort of halfway house to get your creativity out onto that? So whilst you're not throwing shapes, but you are throwing shapes on showing something. Is that how it sort of works?
Yeah. I think Sculpt is for those that may or may not know, it's a program that I've come up with over the years. I've been doing lots of education, and I've systemized in my own mind, in my own way, how we can restore posterior teeth. And copy the anatomy that was given to us, so that rather than being it's actually the anatomy that's carved into the teeth. And I created this sort of system which allows for telecommunication. So we're on Zoom as an example, and people get to tune in live. And the sessions are recorded, so those that miss them get the chance. But it means that we send a subscription box out to people, and they get to just join along, really. Exactly that. It's allowing me, because I've done so much sort of, I suppose, homework or background work, I get to start being manually, dexterously creative, as opposed to creative in terms of other ways. And Sculpt's been a revelation for us, actually, and we've had such great feedback for it. We're still not exactly where we need to be in terms of the infrastructure, unfortunately, but actually we're sold out. Like,
what's standing out for me is the word expression kind of jumps to mind, because it's expression in terms of, the expressive works through, sculpt, composite, and there's expression through dance. It's a need to express who you are, either professionally or through kind of dance.
In my head, I've sort of got this idea of, that sometimes you get oil that comes through, and then it seeps up through the ground, and it finds a way. Even if someone stops it, it sort of finds another way to come up, and that's what I'm sort of seeing, is that you've got this that's part of your core and your being, and ultimately it's going to find its way somewhere. In no matter what you're doing, it's sort of like, oh, there it is.
That's a mega analogy. Actually. I like that, because it is, I don't, and I think, we've talked about this at length, haven't we, Andy? I don't express the way I am for the sake of others, and that's really, really important. It's not, I don't choose sock color or pocket square color or the way I dress for the sake of others. I was having a bit of joyous banter with someone online last week about the clothes that you wear and why you wear them, whatever. And there was a comment about I'm not going to wear it because so and so says I shouldn't, and this, that, and the other, and whatever. And like I said, it was totally harmless. It was but the words rodeo clown were used to explain my dress. So
it was complete banter until the phrase rodeo clown turned up, and it's like, what?
Yeah, thanks for that.
I was like, listen, chap, we need to have a word, don't we? No, it was all in light. But the point I was making is whatever you choose to do, or however you choose to express yourself, or whatever personality traits you have, provided that the number one intention, and I think this is probably one of the main things, that if I was going to use a key word for today, it's all about intention. If your intention is to be free or express who you are for the sake of yourself, not because of society, that's what I think speaks volumes. If your intention is good for the patient and it doesn't go quite right, the patient will sense that. And there's so much crossover in things, because things don't go to plan all the time. Of course they don't. Anyone that says they do are frankly lying.
I was going to say, I think they're either lying or they're not doing things. There's somebody who just sits on the sideline and pass commentary. We talk a lot about physical health, and we talk about mental health, but it would be wonderful if we could get to a stage in life where we just talked about health, because it's all joined up. It's not one or the other. And have you had periods in your life where you've not been as physically active as you'd like to be, or you are? And has that had an impact on your mental health?
Yes, it has. And I like that, because it is just health. The body is one system. It can be segmentalized or compartmentalized into different systems to simplify it, but in essence, it's one being. I was with Koray Ferran, as you guys know, a massive mentor, a huge inspiration to me, and actually a leader of the profession in the UK, if not the world. And he talked about an analogy that you've got a stone in your shoe. Okay, you've got a stone in your shoe, and that slightly puts your knee out on one side. And then what that does is the opposite side of the back starts hurting, because there's this reverberation effect.
You compensate,
you're compensating on other things. And I think there have been times where I'm not as physically active. I mean, even lockdowns are probably an example. Despite us trying to do We Break Fit and keeping relatively fit, I was definitely not training, but I'd say probably a year before that, I definitely wasn't training at the level that I was used to. And you just slowly feel this, I don't know how to put it. It's like this impending doom, because you're not releasing the excess energy or you're not receiving the normal amount of endorphins that you would, or whatever. And strangely, my mum's mum, my grandmother, she said to me, you need to cut all this training stuff out, right? So she said it was about 2016. She's like, sack it off. It's a waste of your time. I was like, I don't quite understand. And she had so much intelligence behind this comment. She's like, there's going to come a day where you can't do it to the level that you're doing it, and you're going to get really down about it. And I was like, no, whatever. And now, like 5 years later, I'm like, you will. Yeah. If you have caffeine every day you upregulate the number of receptors in your brain so that if you don't have caffeine, you're always sluggish. The same thing applies for your life. If you're not active, if you're really usually quite active, and then you go through a 3-week lull, everything's so much heavier. Everything's so much more laborious. But yeah, it's tough. But then again, when you're maximizing your physical, other things start failing as well. So you might not be able to attend conferences, courses, and it's been a balance. It's like ebbs and flows.
It's hard to fit it all in, isn't it? I think is the issue when you're so busy, and life just takes over.
I was going to say, and how do you do?
It's a terrible excuse, really.
Well, and that's the thing. It's because everybody is so busy. It's easy to give yourself permission not to do these things. And at the start of our talk, I listed out all the things you're involved in. So how do you build into your core routine time to make sure that this happens? Because I'm a firm believer that if it's important to us, we'll do it, and if it isn't, we make an excuse.
Yeah.
I think it's one or the other, because we've all got the time available. It's just where we employ that time. We spend, half an hour on Instagram. Well, don't do that. What could you do with that half an hour? But how do you build that into your core routine?
I mean, that's probably quite an apt example. Going back to the beginning part of the question, the way that you do it is incredibly difficult. And I touched on it in just the last thing, the ebbs and flows. Right. You have to accept at certain points, you're going to have much more terms of clinical commitment. You have to accept at certain points, for me, it's August and September, where you're going to have much more familial commitment. You have to accept at certain times, you're going to have much more physical commitment. Now, I suppose the most important thing, and this applies to clinical dentistry as well, if you have a baseline core of things that you have to do as a minimum in a week. And, when you start specifying it into days, it becomes almost undoable. It's unmanageable, because you get yourself down if you've got too many targets and you can't reach them each day. If you've got like a week and you've got X amount of hours in that week, that in that I have to squeeze in X. I have to squeeze in a gym session or two, or I need to go and run some things near my stairs, as you see on my videos, right? I'm in my little communal area, just doing whatever. And I'm sure the people in my apartment block think, oh my God, he's just some sad case that sits in the stairway all the time, randomly. By himself.
You're not rocking backwards and forwards.
No, it's always rocking.
I bet people are like, does he actually even live here? He's just always on the stairs.
He's like, he's been kicked out by his wife again. I mean, that's the third time today.
Excellent. Yeah. Have you got a key? Show me your key.
Oh, God's sakes. No, but I think you have to cut out that fat time. The time that you're just sitting there not doing anything, or the time where you just say, oh, do you know what? I just want to be on social for 10 minutes, let's use Formula One as an example, right? Formula One from 1990 to 2020 has not had any major, massive changes. Every year it's been incremental. And it's the sum of those incremental steps that's created a massive change, a whirlwind change in if you look at 1990 to 2020. But it's the fact that you have a baseline and you constantly keep ebbing away and refining that model. And we're always in search of these really big haymaker type steps that are going to change your life. It doesn't work.
Exist. They don't exist.
They don't. And if you get them, you're lucky. It will go as soon as it comes.
But also, I think it's a consistency thing. But I just find it intriguing that, people take their car for a service once a year. They'll take their pets to the vet for an annual checkup. Yet ourselves, we don't look after ourselves with the same routine, methodical care and attention that we do other things.
Well, do you remember that someone said to us once? It was quite a fascinating one. This is where I not show my dental knowledge. How many teeth have you got? Is it 32 adult teeth?
If you've got wisdom teeth, yes, it is.
Yeah, and I remember someone saying to me that they were an implantologist, and they said, if basically every person valued their tooth at £2,000 a throw, I bet you at 64,000, they'd look after their teeth a lot better than they actually do. And I think it's a fascinating one that, as you say, we take our health for granted, don't we? We only know ourselves. That were, poor Liz, the experience that happened with her partner. We're here one day, we're gone tomorrow. So it's quite interesting.
It's always that, it'll be all right. That type of attitude. And it's like, no, it won't. It won't. I try not to have that attitude clinically. I try not to have that attitude mentally. I try not to have that with my family. Oh, they'll understand. Or, oh, that'll be all right. It won't matter. It always matters. If it crossed your mind, it mattered. It's how you deal with it crossing your mind is the thing that goes forwards.
And would you say, this is a very difficult thing for you to answer, but would you say you're a better dentist as a result of being sharp and physical?
Question.
Has it made you a better dentist?
Categorically, yes. Categorically, yes.
Can you quantify how and why?
Yeah. So, frankly, any sort of exercise are not going to make your hands more able to do what they can do, right? There's an element of genetics and the things that you've done environmentally, like if you've done art or whatever, that are going to make you what you do. But it's really, really well documented that if you are of a higher level of fitness, as an example, your ability to cope with this stress, strain, plot, or mechanism is significantly improved. Okay, so already, just purely on challenges that are going to come up in your life, you're already better well adapted. As soon as that stress comes on, your cardiovascular system is probably more equipped to get the blood pumping around the body into the brain to be able to come up with a logical decision. So even on a scientific level, that applies. But it's the fact that I have that chance to step out of the exact life. It is my life. We treat patients, 4 or 5 times a week. I'm at work 4 or 5 times a week. You're writing letters every day, probably after work. You're doing your photos, you're doing presentations, you're doing podcast, whatever it is. You're completely immersed within this world. And if you keep batting away at it, eventually you'll get through all your goals. And then what? And what are you going to do then?
Yeah.
And it's then when people fall off or they search for something more, exuberant to challenge their mind and all that sort of stuff. And actually, if it works, it works. And, dancing isn't the only example. There's people that do boxing at a competitive level. There's people that do martial arts competitive level. I know people play football at quite a competitive level. And it's whether you play competitive or not, it's just the fact that you're getting blood through the muscular channels, through the veins, through every part of your brain, pumping hard and feeling pretty awful for it at the time, but feeling fantastic about it, maybe that day or even a week later.
I think it's that thing, you never regret a session, whether it's cycling, running, swimming.
Apart from reviewing yourself.
I should have done. That's the one you shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
But also,
right.
I think dentists, obviously, selling practices, we get people selling for a whole host of different reasons. But some people do just because their body's worn out, their neck and their back problems. There's great ergonomic seats and there's designed to help you, but you do end up sitting for long periods in a fairly unnatural position, and that takes its toll on your body. So having a degree of physical fitness has to prolong the life of your career, but also give you that core strength to make sure that you are supporting yourself as well as possible.
And, and that's really, really big, isn't it? Because I've seen people that at the age of, 57, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest occupational hazards that we have, right? Within dentistry. And, dentistry is a particularly manually laborious task and it's quite taxing on the body. And you're right, we're in positions that, and frozen in those positions actually. And the injury doesn't happen because the tension's been building up for all that time. All of a sudden you turn and then it's gone. One other thing that I used to do quite a lot of was I tried to get sports massages once a month just to try and release. And that, not one part of that was ever enjoyable ever. Like every time I've ever gone, it's been like, oh my God, I'm in pain. And I'm like, but you want them to go hard, obviously.
When they ask that, they always say, is that firm enough, or do you want it firmer? And you go,
it's like firmer. Oh dear, yeah. But that I found also supplemented being physically active and also being physically static.
Yeah,
that's the best way to describe it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I hope that the listeners take a lot from this, because there'll be young listeners and there'll be old listeners. And I think that looking after ourselves physically, the crossover to our mental well-being is huge. It releases endorphins. It makes you more creative. I think there's so many aspects. And I think that the tricky thing for people is the start. It's how do you start? How do you build it into your routine? And I think that thing you were saying about you just start small. Don't try and do anything too big. Just build something easy into your routine. See how that goes and then build out from there.
And, it's also really, really well documented. Lots of people like going on diets to try and do weight loss. Yeah. Right. And they'll read somewhere that you need to consume 1,400 calories a day, despite so you're in a calorie deficit so that you lose weight, obviously, but your normal intake is 2,600 as an example. It's like, as soon as you go down to 1,400, it hits the body so hard, you just say, I can't do it. You just give up. You just give up. If you, over 6 months, said to yourself, right, I'm going to go from 2,600 to 2,200 to, 2,000, get down to, and if you get to 1,800, let's say you don't even get to the 1,400, yeah, you've already made 60% of the journey to your goal. And I think that's still a positive direction. And, we talk about, I think we've talked about it quite in quite a lot of depth, that goal setting is so important in your life, but it can be equally as toxic, can't it? Because actually you're like, I need to get it. And as dentists, and I'm sure as you guys are as well, you're really committed to trying to achieve, because you're high achievers. You need to get certain grades to get into dental school. You need to pass the really difficult exams. It's always about achieving. And actually, and I have to take the lesson from this myself, it's about enjoying the journey a little bit. And I'm not good at that. If I was going to talk about my flaw as a person, I never can sit back and say to myself, I enjoyed the journey in anything I've done. It's always been like, I've got to smash it out. I've got to bang it out. And that's the personality disorder side of trying to be so organized. Everything is in balance, yin and yang, and it's all good being so regimental and so conducive to your tone. Make sure you're compartmentalizing, but the disadvantage is when you don't hit an achievement.
I think you're right on the goals. I think that whilst they should inspire you to achieve a target, they also have to be realistic enough to encourage you. Because if it's all just inspiration and it's beyond your reach, it just becomes demotivating.
I think enjoy the journey. I think that's the great. I did one on some fitness thing. I'm still doing it, and I've lost 4 stone, which is pretty cool. And
mega.
And when my wife and I went away last year, we walked from wherever we were to some other place along the hills and things. And when we looked at it, we'd walked something like 12 miles. Now, if you'd have asked me before, did I fancy walking 12 miles? I'd have said, no, I think I'll be all right in the 12 miles. And
you can ask me today, mate. I'll be like, nah.
You could dance 12 miles. Now, that'll be an interesting one. That sounds like a charity event to me.
Yes. Put me in it, guys.
Just thought I'd try it out there, Shiraz. Just saying. But it is. But I think the really important one you said, Shiraz, is enjoy the journey. The danger is, isn't it? We spend so long trying to, or energies trying to get somewhere. But do we, look back where we came from, or more importantly, did we experience it while we were doing it? And I think that's the. And also, really I think
sometimes when you actually achieve the place you want to be at, I listen to lots of podcasts with high performing sports people and the like, and when you hear them, they've won the European Cup or the World Cup. In that moment when they win, there's this kind of empty feeling of
I've done it.
What next? What now? And if you haven't enjoyed all the training and preparation and games and everything, when you actually achieve the thing that matters so much to you, it may not actually deliver.
No, it's true.
Deliver the goods.
I went to a really interesting dance workshop with someone. His name's Promo, and he's from Canada, right? And the really wonderful thing about breaking in general is you meet people from all walks of life and all strains of cloth, and they really break things down in a different way. And he finished his, we did a workshop, so he was teaching us stuff and moves and whatever, and it was fantastic. And the thing that got me the most, right, was at the end, he's like, you just need to be at the time. And I was like, okay, cool. I've heard that before. And he's like, look, when you're in the gym, or when you're in the practice, or when you're doing preparations or whatever, you're always preparing for that event. Let's use dance as an example. You're in the gym, you're training because you know you've got an event. Your mindset is at the event I'm going to, right? Then you get to the event. So you're always looking into the future. You get to the event and you're like, right, so I've nailed this at training 1,000 times. And you're looking into the past and you're never really there, present at the moment, in the moment. And I thought when I heard that, I was like, that just summarized pretty much my whole life. I was like, that's exactly it, isn't it? I'm really bad at trying to enjoy the journey. I push myself to perform to as high a level that are in my ability, not against anyone else, just in my ability. But that takes a lot out of you. And you're like, yeah, in the future, oh yeah, I need to get to this and I want to get to this goal. And when you get there, you're like, yeah, but when I did it, I was doing this and I need to get. And actually, I don't even go back to the past. I'm always just looking to the future again. So you're never really there in the moment.
It's a really good lesson.
Oh my God. Because like I said, these guys may not have done any sort of education that's scientific. They might have done art. They might not do education. I mean, they could be a milkman. There's no background of what they do in life. And when they come out with stuff like that, you're like, you know, it's like, and you're like, wow, yeah. So I need to enjoy the journey one for more. I'm sure I'll be saying that in 5 years' time.
I'm sure you will be. Shiraz, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it. To finish up, we often ask our guests a question or two. So if you could meet anyone, you can meet anyone, still with us, passed away, fictional, real, who would you meet if you were just given the opportunity to sit down with somebody for an hour?
Who would I want to sit down with? I'd probably want to sit down with Ayrton Senna. Ayrton Senna. For those that know or don't know, Ayrton Senna was a Formula One driver and unfortunately passed away from a really what looked like a very, very small crash, but in the wrong way. And he had this just behavior that was absolutely indicative of wanting to, this marginal gains thing, everything, just critically analyzing everything. And just like when you see the Matrix, the lines coming down, right? It's like he would break it down in that way. So Ayrton Senna is someone I'd probably want to pick the brains of and sit down and I would just chat to.
He would be fascinating.
Yeah, he would be fascinating.
He would be a very interesting.
I mentioned science fiction there because Andy doesn't do science fiction, so he's probably never seen The Matrix. Sure.
No, I've not seen it.
I was acting like his interpreter for him.
So you are in The Matrix.
Oh, don't even go there because I'll just get really confusing.
No, I think I might have to do some reading up on this thing.
Yeah, it's great. There's no aliens, so
no, I do know. I think Keanu Reeves is in it.
He is a good man. Well done.
He is.
There's three of them. In fact, they're making another one. I think.
Well, he's got 2 runs.
They are. It's been recorded.
They're making a 4th one, aren't they?
So I'm well behind then. Perhaps I need to finish this podcast and go and watch The Matrix.
Yeah. Well, you need to give yourself 12 hours, mate.
Yeah, so give yourself a while. They do last a long time, but they're very good.
Lovely. Well, honestly, Shiraz, I think our listeners are going to get loads from this. I think they're going to be able to look at their own world, look at their life and make some little fractional adjustments and they'll be better for it. Really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. It's been really good catching up with you and no doubt we'll get to speak soon.
Thank you so much. And keep doing what you're doing, guys. It's really great what you're doing for the profession. I know you guys obviously support practices and clinicians and financial and all of this stuff and all of your branches. But the profession needs more people like you that are just kind, considerate, giving, sharing their knowledge and not being precious about resources, but obviously still making a living and working hard. So thank you so much for all your support in the profession.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it.
That's
lovely.
Very nice of you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's a bit like I love him.
It is.
Yeah. I'd be hugging you if I could right now. I'd be like, get in there.
Virtual hugs. Hugs.
So,
brilliant.
No, thank you so much.
Look after yourself.
Cheers. Thank you, man.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
What an intriguing conversation with Shiraz talking about the power of exercise. He's an absolute legend, isn't he?
I tell you what surprised me was the fact that he took up break dance in 2007. I thought he was going to say like from when I was 12 or something, because it's an unusual one to take up, isn't it? People take up football. I don't really take up football. Might take up arts or archery or something like that. But to take up breakdance,
but it meant so much. I think when we were talking, I used the word. It was an expression. And then he said it's about intention. It's about having the intention to do something. But I also took a really strong message about the physical health and the mental health. Yeah. And it's all just health. And he was saying that for him, being, positively involved in exercise has actually made him a better dentist as well. Which was amazing.
One without the other doesn't work. But no, it was brilliant, really good again. It was really very relaxed, really informative.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.